And now on the line is Bryan O'Mahony. Bryan is the president of AMLÉ. AMLÉ is the name now of the organisation formerly known as the USI. Bryan, welcome to Near FM.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Okay, Bryan, I got in touch with you today for this interview, largely to talk about your name change in AMLÉ, because I, for one, am an Irish speaker, and I love when Irish names are chosen across Ireland and around the world. And I think, as you know, I think I interviewed Pádraig McBride Oscuelga on this issue last week. Oscuelga, can you tell me more, Bryan, about the background to this exciting change as regards your name?
Yeah, this has been something that's been discussed within the student movement for the last number of years. I think ultimately students found it was very important to kind of embrace our native language, that we embraced it more within the organisation and meaningfully started to use it. And we thought that was important within the name change. When we look at other national student unions across Europe, majority of them only have their student union name in their native tongue. So we felt it was important to be able to match that, but meaningfully start re-embracing our Irish language.
And I asked Pádraig McBride in our interview last week, was there much of a debate at your annual conference? Because some people, I imagine, were against or are against, are they?
Yeah, well, the majority of the speakers were overwhelmingly positive towards it. They saw it was a great kind of step for us to take in kind of reclaiming our language again and try to reignite the passion for Gaeilge in this country. Now, there were some people that kind of were debating against this. There's always the fear is that, change is very different, and having an Irish name when you have a lot of international students could come, it could be very confusing to them to understand what we are. But we felt like for us, it was just an important one that we did re-embrace the language, and we could be able to discuss it down the line and be able to explain it down the line when students were interacting with the new name change.
Okay, and what is the situation with AMLÉ in Northern Ireland, Bryan? I just asked because I read the question into ChatGPT a couple of days ago, and it said that AMLÉ have no plans to make a name change up there. Do you have any? What's the story?
So we are an all-island organisation, but we have there's another union in Northern Ireland called NUS-USI. So that is a different organisation completely, and it'd be up for their own membership to vote on and decide on a name change. It wouldn't be something that we could move or enforce.
Okay, I understand across Northern Ireland, the union, yourselves and the NUS are kind of the joint student union. So, you kind of represent half of the students, if you know what I mean. So, is that what is the case? Is it?
Yeah, so they would have their own democratic procedure. So they would have to go through their own conferences in order to vote on a name change for them. But our organisation that I'm the president of, North and South, is only recognised as AMLÉ now moving forward.
All right, because I was looking at your website for Northern Ireland a few days ago, and it has NUS/USI, so that's going to be NUS/AMLÉ in the not too distant future, is it?
Yeah, if the students in Northern Ireland vote on it, because that's technically a separate organisation from us.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on. We could talk about the name change all day. I find it great, Okay, to talk about third level students in general at the moment, Bryan, and I'm conscious that the budget is coming up soon as well, although our interview might not be broadcast until after the budget. Can you give me a summary or list, Bryan, of the biggest issues that yourselves and AMLÉ face most of the time on a day-to-day or hour-to-hour level? Because the two that I hear the most about, correct me if I'm wrong, but the two I hear before anything else is accommodation and student fees. What's the story, Bryan?
Yeah, so with student fees, we've seen a once-off reduction for the last number of years. As we would have seen, the contribution fees last year would have been €2,000. Now, there was a lot of things happening over the summer where it looked like it was potentially being raised up to 3,000, but there's rumours coming out that it may have a permanent reduction of €500. While we definitely welcome a permanent reduction, which is something we've been asking for a long time, we feel that 500 isn't going far enough, and coming at the late stage that this announcement will be around the fees, we would see that We would hope that the permanent reduction would come down to €2,000, so that students wouldn't be paying more than that. As we look across Europe, we're still in the EU, we're the most expensive college for students to attend. So we want to be able to be a more accessible country for education for students.
I went to college personally over 20 years ago. I was in Clonshire for 2 years, and then I went to Wolverhampton, University of Wolverhampton for a year. And when I was in Wolverhampton, we had to pay tuition fees. We didn't have the regular fees that the English students had, so it wasn't very expensive, although we had to pay for accommodation as well. Like I remember at that time that it was a big issue because it was only relatively new at the time, but student fees, the cost of going to college in England 20 years ago, and it's probably still the case, was very high. Students were leaving college after 3 or 4 years with huge debt. Is that the case in Ireland now, Brian? Like when you leave college, whether you're working or not through college, like after 3 or 4 years, are students leaving nowadays with loads of debt? Are they?
Well, I don't know about this. What we're more finding is that students are impoverishing themselves. We've had student unions do surveys, and they're finding out a lot of students are actually skipping meals in order to go to class. They're working full-time jobs and skipping classes in order to be able to afford to eat or to go to college. You know, they're commuting 2 to 3 hours a day, being completely burnt out by the time to get to college. And, when you're commuting that long and you're trying to get home in the evening, you're not really engaging in a clubs and society. So the best years of your life being a part of college, you're not really actually being a part of that college social circle and being able to actually embrace the college experience.
That's terrible to hear that, yeah. As well as that, I know from my experience at college 20 years ago, if you're working in college, like in a job, part-time or full-time, I worked part-time in first year in college, and like even working part-time 20 hours a week, it was a couple of evenings at the end of the week and then all day Saturday and most Sundays. And I found it really affected my education. I wasn't learning as much. And then for first year, I got my exam results, and instead of getting merits and distinctions, I got all passes. But then what happened was I had money saved up from working in college. So in about October, in second year in college, I got a sport moment idea, and I said, here, I can afford to pay for myself for the rest of second year in college. So I gave it to my parents, and I stopped working, and I could concentrate on my studies for second year. And I did pretty well in the exams, and I attribute that solely to because I had more time, I had more leisure, I could afford to devote time. So like, I think I think it's kind of terrible the way students have to work. Like, and you're saying skipping meals, that's worse again. But I think that working in a part-time or full-time job with education, some people can probably do it, but I think it's not ideal. Do you?
Yeah, so look, working part-time was always kind of a thing with college, but now we're hearing students working full-time jobs or multiple jobs at the same time in order to make ends meet, When they're working full-time, they're not always having the leisure of having evening-based jobs. Some of them are daytime shifts in retail and stuff like that. So sometimes they have to make a choice of whether they can accept the shift and get more money that week in order to be able to afford food, or miss at the cost of missing their class, missing the mandatory classes, getting a mark on their attendance that they've missed it. And, how can people meaningfully engage in their classes and their academic studies if they're constantly tired and burnt out and working the whole time and not able to engage in the academic study?
And Brian, is this cost of living crisis that we're all going through, but it's affecting students hugely, is this mainly down to accommodation, is it?
Yeah, well, we've seen this country that, the electricity bills are going up, the gas bills are going up, grocery costs are going up. But then, of course, there's accommodation too. Every year we see the fight for people trying to get accommodation. People now are starting to not go towards colleges that they want to go, but towards a college that is closer near to home that they can try and commute to, The cost of accommodation, some places in Dublin, the norm for me to hear for a student paying for accommodation in Dublin can be up to €1,200 a month. As students that, when I started college in Waterford, I was paying €300 a month for rent. By the time I finished college and was just leaving, it was up to nearly 600 a month for the same accommodation. And we're seeing that huge leap with the accommodation crisis. Yeah, it's hard for students to make ends meet at the end of the day now.
I'm glad my college days are a long time ago, and I was only in college for 2 years in Ireland because I was in my third year in England. And situation seems to be tough. It is tough going for most students. That's the case. Some students I know come from like their parents are wealthy or whatever. They can probably help them out. But I imagine it's most students are finding it tough, are they, Brian?
Yeah, well, a lot of students would be stretching to meet ends meet. Now, there is definitely a privileged few that can go to college, don't need to, work, and they have that privileged background. But I was a SUSI student. I couldn't afford it. My SUSI didn't even cover my rent for accommodation at the time, let alone all my food and other costs. So, there's definitely always going to be the privileged few. But when I see kind of reports of people pointing to the privileged few and talking about students going out and drinking, it's not looking at the reality of the students that can't afford it, the students that maybe are estranged from their family, no contact with their family, no financial support. So they don't have that family support behind them and able to get them through college. So they have to depend on themselves to get through it.
Okay. And yourselves and AMLÉ, Brian, you're in favour of third level college in general being free, aren't you?
Yeah, so a policy we have in our file is the long-term plan of reduction of fees to abolishment. Yeah, it's important that in this country that we see the underfunding of the higher education sector. We've seen a long identified funding gap in the higher education sector in Ireland. We see lecturers that are living in hostels in order to teach classes. We're seeing students trying to starve themselves to get to the class. It's just really important to really point out that if we care about being a world-class place for people to study and educate, and we're really proud of our education system, we just really need to invest in it.